Ladies and gentlemen, if you can have your attention, please. Our ceremony will begin shortly. Before the ceremony begins, we would like to have your cooperation on a few things. Firstly, kindly be informed that you may write down the comments of the event or questions for the panels throughout the official YouTube or Facebook UITM Cawangan Melaka. Secondly, you are most welcome to share this event with your colleagues or friends throughout the social media. Your cooperation is highly appreciated. Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable guest of honor, indah bermalam si awan petang berarak di celah pepohon ara. Pemanis kalam, selamat datang. Awal bismillah, pembuka bicara. Melati kuntum, tumbuh melata, sayang merebah di pohon cemara. Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Saya sembah pembuka bicara. The Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad Noor, Rector University Teknologi Mara, UITM Cawangan Melaka, Malaysia. The respected Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saladin bin Abdul Rasul, Chairman, Asian Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences, ACBES 2021. Our respected keynote speakers, Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan, United States of America, USA. Professor Dr. Ferdinand Akhtargul, Australia. Professor Dr. Atiur Rahman from Bangladesh, former Governor of Central Bank, Bangladesh. Professor Dr. Zilal Hamzah from Indonesia. Collaborating universities from Malaysia, University Selangor, UNISEL, Sunway University. From Indonesia, Trisakti University, Jakarta, Institut Agama Islam Tafakufiddin, Dumai, Sekolah Tinggi Ilmu Ekonomi Syariah Bengkalis. From Pakistan, National University of Computer and Emerging Sciences, Karachi. From Bangladesh, United International University, Dhaka, Islamic University, Kushtia, Comilla University, Bangladesh. From India, International Finance and Banking, FCN Institute of Management, St. Agnes College, India. And from Sri Lanka, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka, Open University of Sri Lanka, distinguished participants, dedicated committee members, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, welcome and selamat datang to the Asian Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences ACBES 2021 with the theme Contemporary Research Insight in the Area of Business, Economics and Social Sciences Development. On behalf of the organizing committees, we are honored to have all of you with us here today. Thank you for your support and contribution in ensuring the success of ACBES 2021. Before we proceed any further, let us recite Al-Fatiha to seek for the blessing from Allah. Al-Fatiha. Ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, please observe the national anthem, Negaraku, and UiTM song, Wawasan Setia Warga UiTM. Thank you very much. Without further ado, please allow me to invite the respected Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saladin Abdul Rasul, Chairman, Asian Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences at 2021 to deliver his welcoming remarks. Please welcome him.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. and a very good morning to the Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad Noor, Rector UiTM Cawangan Melaka, our respected keynote speakers, first Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan from USA, second Professor Dr. Ferdinand Akhtar Good, Australia, third Professor Dr. Atul Rahman of Bangladesh, who is also the former Governor of Central Bank Bangladesh, fourthly Professor Dr. Zidal Hamzah, Indonesia, and also representatives from collaborating universities, firstly from Malaysia, University Selangor or UNISEL, and Sunway University, from Indonesia, Trisakti University Jakarta, Institut Agama Islam Tafakuddin Dumai, and Sekolah Tinggi Ilmu Ekonomi Syariah Bungkalis. From Pakistan, National Institute of Computer and Emerging Sciences, Karachi. From Bangladesh, United International University Dhaka, Islamic University Kushtia, and Comedia University Bangladesh. From India, International Finance and Banking, MSN, Institute of Management, and St. Agnes, India. And finally, from Sri Lanka, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka and Open University of Sri Lanka. Distinguished participants, dedicated committee members, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to our virtual Asia Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences, or known as ACBES 2021, hosted by UiTM Cawangan Melaka. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this conference holds special value because this conference is organized on digital platform by UiTM Cawangan Melaka, as we want our guest speakers, presenters, and participants to stay free and maintain social distancing. The theme of this conference is Contemporary Research Insights in the area of business, economics, and social science development. I am very pleased that this conference many distinguished presenters and esteemed participants have come from both home and abroad to share their thoughts, knowledge, and opinions on pertinent issues related to the changing dynamics of the country and around the world. The schedule over the next 2 days will be intensive, yet I believe it's going to be productive. You will be able to benefit from the knowledge of international and local experts and exchange ideas and experiences with all of us. This conference also provides opportunities for young researchers to share their studies and also their ideas. I would like to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to our keynote speakers for honoring us their keynote speeches for this conference. Not to forget, I would also like to thank to all the participants who have submitted the papers for this conference. We have received about 95 full papers from the participants, and all of these papers will have the opportunity to be published in selected journals, as mentioned in our website. Last but not least, my heartfelt thanks to the organizing committee for their dedication, time, and efforts to make this conference possible. And I'm also very happy to have the great support from our strategic partners for making this conference a success. And also special thanks to the management of UiTM Cawangan Melaka for the support and cooperation. We are looking forward to organizing other conferences in the future. And I would really thank everybody for their effort to make this conference a success. And I'm also very thankful that we have special keynote speakers with industrial experience who can share their ideas and their thoughts that we can share with them. And I would like to end my speech by wishing everyone a successful, safe, and fruitful conference. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Dr. Muhammad Saladin, for your inspiring speech. And now, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, it is a great honor to invite the Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad Noor, Rector UiTM Cawangan Melaka, Malaysia, to address his speech and to officiate the Asian Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences at BEST 2021. Please welcome him.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Respected Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saladin Abdul Rasul, Chairman of the Asian Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences 2021. Our respected keynote speakers, Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan from USA, Professor Dr. Ferdinand Gul from Australia, Professor Dr. Atiur Rahman, former Governor of Central Bank, Bangladesh, Professor Dr. Zilal Hamzah from Indonesia, our collaborating universities from Malaysia, University Selangor and Sunway University, from Indonesia, Trisakti University Jakarta, Institut Agama Islam Tafakuddin Dumai, and Sekolah Tinggi Ilmu Ekonomi Syariah Bengkalis. From Pakistan, the National University of Computer and Imaging Sciences. From Bangladesh, United International University Dhaka, Islamic University Kustia and Comilla University Bangladesh. From India, International Finance and Banking, Institute of Management and St. Agnes India. And from Sri Lanka, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka and Open University of Sri Lanka. Distinguished participants, dedicated committee members, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to express my utmost gratitude to Allah SWT because with this blessing, we have successfully organized the Asian Conference on Business, Economics and Social Sciences with the theme Contemporary Research Insights in the area of business, economics and social science development. Due to this global pandemic caused by COVID-19, the task of organizing such event is challenging, forcing us to work under unfamiliar conditions and situations. These changes have made us to adapt and familiarize ourselves in using technological platforms in making this event successful. Therefore, I would like to congratulate the dedicated committee members for organizing the event in the new norm successfully. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected people worldwide, leading to the near total closures of schools, universities, and colleges. Nevertheless, the spirit of producing invention and innovations that are beneficial for society is still ongoing, even though during this pandemic. This conference provides a platform for academicians, researchers, and postgraduate students to generate creative and innovative ideas even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although this event cannot be organized in the conventional face-to-face approach, we have adapted and embraced these changes to remain competitive and relevant in the fourth industrial revolution, IR 4.0. This conference has focused on various contemporary sub-themes from different fields of studies. This situation has given the opportunity for the researchers to explore new insight in the area of business, economic, and social sciences. This is aligned with the Industrial Revolution 4.0 to produce creative, data literate, and critical scholars from various fields. Thus, this conference provides an opportunity for the scholars from all over the world to share their knowledge and experiences. I believe the effort shown by the committee members and collaborative universities and participants will have a significant impact on the socio-economic development of the global community in developing new ideas and methods successfully. I hope this conference will build research interest and networking while creating and presenting new ideas and innovations that can be commercialized. Finally, I would like to once again congratulate the countless efforts and teamwork spirit from all parties, especially those who have made this event successful. Hopefully, this little effort of ours will be rewarded by Allah, inshallah. With Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I proudly appreciate the Asian Conference on Business, Economics, and Social Sciences ACBES 2021. Thank you.
Thank you to the Honorable Rector for the speech and for launching our event today. Padang Jarak, Padang Baiduri, tempat raja membangun kota. Bertemu bijak dengan jauhari, bagai cincin dengan permata. Ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, moving on to the next agenda, we shall be having a launching montage by the organizing committee of ACBES 2021. Please welcome them. Thank you very much and congratulations for the tremendous montage just now. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall have a break for a few moments. The first keynote speech session by Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan is at 10:30 a.m. this morning. Please stay tuned and thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, it is a great honor to invite our first keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan from United States of America. This first session shall be moderated by Professor Dr. Fazlan Sufian from UiTM Cawangan, Malacca, Malaysia. Please welcome them.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
It's an honor for us to have you this morning, Prof. Hassan. Okay, inshallah, I will try my best to introduce you to our participants today, inshallah. Okay, so a brief, this is a very brief introduction because, the one that we have, okay, is a very, I would say, distinguished and complete, background of your career. Okay, Alhamdulillah. Okay, Professor Dr. Muhammad Kabir Hassan, okay, is currently a professor of finance in the Department of Economics and Finance at the University of New Orleans, where he currently holds three endowed chairs, namely the Hibernia Professor of Economics and Finance, Hancock Whitney Chair, Professor in Business, and also the Bank One Professor in Business. Professor Hassan received his Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Mathematics from Gustavus Adolphus College, and Master of Arts in Economics, and also PhD in Economics, PhD in Finance from the University of Nebraska Lincoln in the United States. Professor Hassan is a financial economist with vast consulting, research, and teaching experiences in both economics and the finance field. And he has done consulting works for the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the African Development Bank, the United Nations Development Program, various central banks across the world, and as well as many other private organizations. Professor Hassan has published over 300 papers in book chapters, as well as top refereed academic journals. He has also edited and published 23 scholarly books and 3 textbooks in Islamic banking and finance. As a frequent traveler, Professor Hassan gives lectures and workshops in the US and abroad, and has presented over 450 research papers at professional conferences, and also has delivered more than 200 invited papers at seminars. Professor Hassan is currently the editor-in-chief of International Journal of Islamic and Middle Eastern Finance and Management. He is also the senior editor of International Journal of Emerging Markets, and currently serves as an associate editor of numerous leading finance and economics journals published by top publishers all around the world. Professor Hassan also sits on the editorial board of various journals published by top publishers, as well as universities around the world. Professor Hassan has numerous teaching awards for his outstanding teaching from the University of New Orleans and outside academic institutions. He has been awarded the 2018 University of New Orleans Gordon H. Nick Muller International Leadership Medallion, the 2019 University of Louisiana System Outstanding Faculty Member Award, the 2019 UNO Library Bank Prize Award. Professor Hassan has also won the 2016 Islamic Development Bank IDB Prize in Islamic Banking and Finance. To recognize his outstanding research and scholarly works, Professor Hassan has been awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the UNO Research Council in 2019. Please join me to welcome our first distinguished speaker this morning, Professor Dr. Muhammad Kabir Hassan, who will share with us his thoughts on the convergence of ethical and Islamic finance. Welcome, Prof. Kabir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Thank you, Fazlan. It's good to see you after many months. I do not know when I saw
Thank
you
you very
last
much,
time,
Prof. Kabir.
about 2 years ago, and you still look same young person. So
Thank you very much.
today I'm going to make this presentation. So I have prepared slides. So can you see my? I don't see my slide from my screen. Do you see my slide? Do you see my
Yeah,
slide?
I can see it now. Yeah, I can
Okay.
see it now.
Okay,
Alhamdulillah.
so in order to keep myself on track, I'm going to pretty much follow on the slides, and it will be easier for communication as well from my side and your side. So I retitle my presentation is Value-Based Islamic Finance. Is it convergent with ethical finance? So there are frequently asked questions in the industry and academia, like what ethics had to do with finance? How can we expand our business without taking loans? Interest has become part and parcel of global financial system. And it is impossible to have two systems of banking. It is the same thing, only the names differ, interest to profit. If we forsake dealing in interest, we will be left out of business. Suitable in those golden days, but not in these fiercely competitive modern markets. Only be applicable in Islamic countries. It is just a dream, never can be a reality. So many of us have this type of questions, doubts about Islamic finance, Islamic economic system, and so on. These are so legitimate questions and doubts. So I would try to expand on these points and try to show you at the end that Islamic economic system is an alternative to conventional economic system and as well the Islamic financial system. So if you look at the numbers, 2008 and 9, the Islamic finance industry was managing funds reaching about USD 800 billion to US 1 trillion during the global financial crisis. And that number increased during the pandemic to by 150% during COVID-19. And we expect that industry to grow to 20 trillion mark. And the question is how we can achieve it. So let me start with Islamic Sharia 101 and Riba. So we know that Islam is a complete code of life that encompasses every aspect of human life. It provides directives as to how economic and financial activities should operate based on moral and not just economic system. And the source of Islamic morality comes from Sharia. So if you look at Islam, it has two angles. On my side, left side is Aqidah, faith and belief. On the right hand side, Akhlaq, morality and ethics. In the middle is the Sharia, practices and activities. And the Sharia has two parts again. Ibadah, man to God worship, is a relationship between you and God. Nobody can ask any question in that regard. You have to follow the basic fundamental principles of ibadah that has been enshrined in the Quran and Sunnah. Muamalat, on the other hand, your daily lives, man-to-man activities, and that can be categorized into different parts as well. Your political activities is also part of Islam, economic activities, and social activities. Now, out of this economic activities, you have other economic activities, and you also have banking and financial activities. So one of the reason that we raised all this question in my first slide, that the finance has taken over the entire industry in a sense. So it's supposed to be a one subset of broader Islamic economic system, but now that financial system is leading the way. So what is the Islamic worldview? The essence of Islam is Tawheed, oneness and sovereignty of God, has many implications. Allah is the only source of value. Humans are created equal. Resources are transferred from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Humans are viceroy and khalifa. Humans have free will. Muslim, by definition, is submission to the will of God. And the will of God is revealed or expressed in revelation. So there are two sources of knowledge in Islam. Revealed knowledge is the Sharia, Quran, Hadith and Sunnah, saying and tradition of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And there is a derived knowledge, fiqh, through istihad, and one is called analogy, qiyas, ijma, consensus, and culture, custom, and so on. So the two sources of law in Islam, as I said before, revealed knowledge and fiqh. Now, Islamic laws can be broadly classified into two types. Ibadah, any worship which is not legalized by Sharia, is void. So there is no innovation allowed in Ibadah, devotional acts like how you pray, how you fast, and so on. Muamalat, dealings or transactions. Transactions are permitted unless prohibited by Islamic law. So this is what we call principle of permissibility. Everything is permitted unless it is forbidden. In Muamalat, new transaction can be accommodated through istihad as long as do not contain the prohibited riba and gharar. Now, riba, it came in different stages. The final stage of prohibition in stage 4. The final verse says, O you who believe, be afraid of Allah and give up what remains from riba if you are believers, and if you do not do it, then take a notice of word from Allah and His Messenger. And there are two types of riba. One is called riba al-fadl, that comes from the hadith, and riba al-nasiya, that comes from the Quran, the Quranic riba. Now, riba al-fadl, if there is an exchange among the same species of riba goods, the 6 that has been mentioned in the hadith, it has to be done on the spot and should be of equal amounts. If the amounts exchanged are different, then it will be riba al-fadl. Al-nasiya, the root word of nasa means to postpone, refers to a delayed payment riba. When there is exchange of the same species over a period of time, the amount exchanged has to be the same. If an exchange is paid over the amount, this will lead to riba al-nasiya. So riba al-fadl, as I said before, riba in exchange contracts based on the saying of the Prophet, gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, salt for salt, like for like, equal for equal, hand to hand. If the commodities differ, then you may sell as you wish, provided the exchange is hand to hand. On the other hand, riba al-nasiya, riba and loan contract, you give out loan principal sum, repayment include additional amount because of delay in payment, and that is prohibited according to the Quran, and that is also called the riba al-jahiliya. Now, if you look at the riba al-fadl, the 6 commodities could be divided into 2 categories: currency, gold and silver, staple food, wheat, barley, dates and salt. So if you dissect this, so if their type is same, the function is same, the role of exchange is equal amount on the spot, like gold for gold, dates for dates, quality does not play a role. So if you have a lower quality dates, you have to exchange it for money and use that money to buy higher quality dates. But you cannot exchange 2 low quality dates with 1 gram of high quality dates. If the type is different but the function is same, the role of exchange is on the spot, like gold is silver on the current exchange rate, barley dates in the barter on current exchange rate, USD and Saudi Riyal or Malaysian ringgit in the current exchange rate. But if the type is different, function is different, you are free to trade. For example, you are using gold to buy wheat, you are using Saudi Riyal to buy goods and so on. So if you dive into more details, so what is the difference between riba al-fadl, why that has been prohibited, and loan riba? The property riba al-fadl is a luxurious properties. You can eat the low quality date and high quality dates. The nutrition value will be the same, but the taste will be different. But the loan riba is a time dependent properties. When you need money or borrow money, you need this money because you do not have any other means of buying your daily livelihood and so on. The demand side, if you look at riba al-fadl by the rich, so you're buying a luxurious car rather than a simple low model car. And loan riba, when a person need money by the needy people. Elasticity, these are very high price elastic, riba al-fadl. So if the price of the car goes up and you try to switch to another version of it. But in a loan riba, if the price of staple goes up, you have to buy it. So it's very price inelastic. Price gap is exogenous, but the loan riba price gap is endogenous. In the riba al-fadl, there's a low instability, but loan riba is high instability. And because of this, riba al-fadl has also been forbidden according to Islamic Sharia. Now, if we look at a little bit further, how can you use money? What is the use of money? You can use the money to give a loan to someone, and the objective is to help. You can ask for a guarantee, but you cannot ask for any extra. Or you can save the money. So if I give you the money, so you can give me a guarantee, but in return, I cannot ask for extra. If you invest, you can ask for extra profit loss sharing basis, but there cannot be any guarantee. So this is the rule of game, rule of thumb. If you give loan, there's a one rule. If you save, there's another rule, invest. But how do you define a operational definition of riba? Any financial contract which contains simultaneously extra and guarantee constitutes riba. So this is the operational definition that I use in order to understand myself what is a riba in a financial instrument or not. Now let me move to the second part of my presentation, Islamic finance bringing value and sustainability to society. So ethical finance bringing value to society, creating sustainable and meaningful value to the society, aligning financial practices towards purposes that include social aspects. So if you look at the middle column, achieving social good while generating financial returns. You do social good, you practice in social good. So what are the internal value drivers? Showing support for its employees, providing a healthy and safe environment, examining entire supply chain, performing corporate social responsibility project, and discussing social and governance issues. On the right-hand side, how social values are being addressed to optimize positive impact on society, economy, well-being, and development, and contributing back to the community. And social good, provision of specific goods or services aimed at benefiting the society, and practicing social good, a behavioral outcome to achieve desired results, inclusion, dealing with the underserved, economic development, and social initiatives. So Islamic finance and bringing value to the society, it promotes social trust, cooperation, and solidarity. It requires balance between individual rights and rights of the society and the state. Doing good is encouraged, does not subscribe to encroachment on anyone's proprietary rights. It advocates fairness, it promotes comprehensive human development, and stimulates economic activity and entrepreneurship while addressing poverty and inequality. So Islamic finance should engage in socially responsible activities to assist individuals or societies to enhance their living and environmental conditions. Now, Islamic finance is forms of social financing channels, promoting and providing social good. How does it do it? You have the Waqf, Islamic Trust, responsible for supporting and funding of education establishment, cited for supporting the founding and continued existence of many famous universities. Sadaqah, the regular giving of alms is encouraged as a means of cleansing wealth. Zakat, tithes, wealth redistribution to the underserved is made obligatory on a yearly basis. And also you have the cleansing of tainted income in prohibiting committing what is forbidden in Islamic finance. A mechanism has been put in place for cleansing of tainted income by channeling them to charity. So if we compare again ethical finance and Islamic finance, if we start with value proposition outlined in the stated intent for ethical finance, like for example, environmental sustainability is one of the goals. And for Islamic finance, stated intent expounded in the Quran and Hadith from the principles of vicegerency. And manner environmental sustainability is achieved. Clear articulation on environmental consideration only began following Bandut Land Report 1987, which embedded in ESG investing, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In Islamic finance, do good and prevent harm by treating the environment in a fair and just manner, moderation, avoiding wastage and excess, treat living beings with mercy, duty of care to protect and keep safe for next generation, and the methodologies adopted for ethical finance, different treatment processes, negative screening, ESG integration, shareholder activism, and for Islamic finance, you have the sector screening and entity screening, both moral screening and financial screening. Now, advancing the environmental sustainable agenda, there are different framework or organization are achieving this. For example, Global Alliance on Banking for Values. It was founded 2009, network of banking leaders committed to advance positive change in the banking sector. Environmental sustainability is a stated goal, achieved through greater transparency and disclosure on assets committed to save the planet. Development of social responsibility report. If you look at Fortune 500 change the world list, identified 50 Fortune 500 companies that are committed to doing good. Areas evaluated include efforts to change the world by reducing damage to the environment. And Dow Jones Sustainability Indices selects leaders across sectors committed to, among others, mitigate climate change. Selection is also based on specified environmental sustainability criteria. Then you have the FTSE for Good Index. Environmental sustainability criteria form part of the assessment in addressing ESG issues. Companies are assessed on the environmental management and climate change and targeted for impact investment. Finally, capital is for a defined purpose, measurable impact on the environment alongside financial return on investment and exclusion of investment that damage the environment. So, Islamic finance and the objective of environmental sustainability and a detailed framework for assessment of environment has yet to be developed, but it can be achieved through set of core values like Adl, treat the environment just and fairly, Wasat, middle path or moderation about wastage and excess, Amana, trust and custodianship of the earth, and Rahma, treat every living being with mercy. Explicit is negative screening to exclude activities that are harmful to the environment. So, key observations on ethical finance, social responsible investing. So, adoption of the ESG framework. So, if you look at the financial institutions of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, United Nations Global Impact, as explained before. So, each one of these has their own screening methodology, ethical and SRI relationship product and services. For example, Green Finance Initiative, SRI. ESG-related indices, you have the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices and FTSE for Good. And the ESG-related capital market instrument, you have the Green Bond Principles and Climate Bonds. So there is a rapid growth of the different screening methodology, even though there has been, the convergence of different criteria is there, but there are also differences among the different methodologies. Now, when you look at Islamic finance, consistently applies Sharia screening methodology. It excludes business with haram elements. It ensures business is aligned with the requirements of Sharia and ensure financial and other operational aspects are conducted within permissible limits. The development of complete and complex Islamic financial system. So there are institutions including banks, takaful companies, fund management companies. There are instruments including sukuk and mutual funds. You have market, Islamic financial market, Islamic capital market, Islamic equity market. And you have the Sharia compliant indices. There are rapid growth with consistent approach of different, there are methodologies are being used, but there are more convergence in this area than divergence. Now, Islamic finance also brings financial sustainability and how that is being done. The GFC response to financial stability challenges, what happened? It enhanced the role of regulators in imposing discipline on financial industry toward achieving financial sustainability for both conventional finance and Islamic finance as well. So supervisory oversight has been strengthened. forward-looking surveillance has been put in place, resolution and crisis management capability has been enhanced, and added macro-prudential measures. So the regulatory reform has achieved all these things in order to bring sustainability to the system. So ethical finance, the contribution to financial stability, in summary, it is a longer-term orientation. It avoids short-term transaction. It avoids high-risk speculative activities. It has a governance process within the ESG framework. It has a high degree of disclosure and transparency. Emphasis on ethics, culture, and values. So elements of ethical finance that contribute to financial stability. And also the Islamic finance, the elements of Islam and the country financial stability, requirement that financial transaction be supported by real economic activity, profit and risk sharing, hence built-in risk management. You have the robust governance process, embedded transparency, avoiding speculative or illegal activities. So Islamic finance, a comprehensive financial system with a centralized assessment arrangement to ensure its consistent application. It exists as a complete and comprehensive financial system. Sharia forms the foundation for operation of financial intermediation, and there has to be Sharia oversight all the time. So there are different sustainable development regulations, standard for financial stability. You have the International Financial Standard and Sustainable Development, and elements incorporated by regulators, financial inclusion and climate change, introduction of principle of proportionality, and potential role of international supervisory structure like Financial Stability Board, BIS, IMF, World Bank, IMF reports on observance of standards and codes, and central bank's own initiative. So generally, sustainable development has yet to be explicitly considered, but nothing to prevent regulators or financial sector to act consistent with SD, sustainable development, financial inclusion, strengthening ethics, culture, and environmental sustainability have drawn recognition. If you look at within the Islamic financial sphere, you have the international financial architecture exists for financial stability. For example, IFSB based in Kuala Lumpur, AUFI based in Bahrain, and some form of consistent practice exists. Culture and ethics underpin Sharia compliance. Practices may be divergent, but fundamentals are consistent and to a large extent convergent. And you have the international supervisory structure supply, subject to similar requirements of Financial Stability Board, Bank for International Settlement, IMF, World Bank Financial Stability Assessment, and IMF reports on observance of standards and codes. So Islamic finance and ethical finance share common goals. Both have long-term orientation, sustainability. Both are inclusive. Both emphasize on ethical values. Both emphasize economic well-being, and also both emphasize preserving interests of the next generation. But differentiation, so there is a difference in focus. Ethical finance, priority to the environment, adding value to society, but that value doesn't necessarily have to be religious value. But Islamic finance, on the other hand, strongly anchored to real economy and strong built-in elements of financial stability. Now, strategies and approaches, same preliminary intent is screening. Islamic finance operates a Sharia screening methodology that consistently applied, and ethical finance also adopting ESG consideration, wide-ranging screening process to assess its adoption. So both ensuring fairness and inclusivity, both adopt principles of transparency, disclosure, and good governance practices. So there is a study done by Refinitiv. What they have found that if you incorporate ESG scores, 6% higher for Sharia compliant financial companies and 10% higher for Sharia compliant non-financial companies. So ESG score actually increases the rate of return or performance of different companies. So there is a convergence between Sharia and ESG screening. Sharia and ESG screening show some correlation. Combining these two can improve our risk-adjusted returns. Greater focus on ESG specific screening on the top of Sharia screening would minimize the risk from some exposure. So ESG quality of Sharia compliant companies, Previously, it was presumed that Sharia compliance methods prefer governance. However, analysis on investable equities revealed that preference is more towards environmental social dimension. Data on ESG scores of Sharia compliant, non-compliant companies demonstrate that Sharia compliant companies tend to receive higher scores than non-compliant companies, and ESG performance of Sharia compliant companies tend to be highest in the workforce scores, corporate social responsibility strategy, and human rights score. And Islamic banks can benefit from including Sharia compliant companies with better ESG score in their portfolios. So the companies in the real economy get a bigger ESG lift from Sharia compliance screening. The environmental score is being boosted by the presence of companies that are developing innovative technology to address environmental issues. The improvement in the social score may be driven by the sector exclusion screen, which avoid companies dependent upon products that harm humanity, and the financial ratio screens may also help avoid companies whose reliance upon debt may drive their focus too much towards the short term at the expense of long term environmental and social sustainability. So there's a link between ESG, Sharia compliance, and performance. As I said before, both Sharia compliance screening and ESG screening create portfolios with similar characteristics. So combining both screens can add significant new information. And Islamic banks face indirect environmental risk based on types of economic activities they finance, and they can factor in environmental and social risk into its charges to reduce risk exposure, and it can also influence clients to adopt mitigation techniques. So I have a Singapore Economic Review one paper, what we use different type of screening, both qualitative and quantitative screening. So if you look at the qualitative screening, so these are all Malaysian companies. 200 companies start with. If you use only qualitative screening or moral screening, almost 70% survive. Then we use qualitative liquidity, 40% survive. Qualitative liquidity and interest, 29. But if we combine qualitative liquidity and interest and debt, only 19% of the companies survive. So what it means that when you use this Sharia screening, both qualitative and quantitative, it reduces the investable universe for the investors to choose from. But we also have another paper came out recently, Journal of Accounting and Finance. So, very often we have all this threshold, 33% debt, 45% debt. So we have sort of looked at the Islamic jurisprudence. There is lack of religious-based support. There is internal inconsistency. There are misclassification error. And the claim that Islamic compliant investments are more socially responsible, there is no clear-cut empirical evidence, could be significantly affected by how compliance with Islamic law is measured. So we have created a score called I-score, and we look at different violations of the companies. So the mechanical components, as this is an equation, I-score, and the violation, we use 4 violation: leverage ratio, cash ratio, receivable ratio, ratios of sales from non-permissible sources. So what I'm trying to say is that we look at the quantitative screen and we look at, okay, it's 20%, 30%. The more and more it violates, it becomes less and less Sharia compliant. So what we have found is a big paper. Just to summarize the results, stocks are level compliant by Dow Jones Islamic Index do not have higher CSR scores than non-compliant counterparts. So it's according to DJIM methodology. So there is no empirical support to the common belief that the Sharia compliant investment as they stand now are more socially responsible. However, the index that we've created, Islamic I-score, is superior to the traditional threshold methods in capturing the linear association between corporate social responsibilities and elements of Islamic Sharia screening. Islamic financial institutions and Sharia compliant funds can better fulfill their promises, a more socially responsible use of investors' money by constructing portfolios using indices such as I-score as you develop, instead of the threshold-based classification method such as those employed by the Dow Jones Islamic Market and other institutions. Now I'm coming to Islamic finance and SDG. We have lots of problems in this world. 1 in 5 people still lacks access to modern electricity. 836 million people still live in extreme poverty. Globally, 1 in 9 people in the world today, about 800 million, are undernourished. Over 100 million youth worldwide lack basic literacy skills. More than 6 million children still die before their 5th birthday each year. Water scarcity affects more than 40% of the global population, is projected to rise. 828 million people live in slums today, and the numbers keep rising. So within this framework, the global challenges, how this impact investing or Islamic finance can play a critical role. So what is the definition of impact investing? Investments intended to create positive impact beyond financial return. So investment that provides capital, business designed with intent to generate measurable positive social and environmental impact and expect financial return on investment. Now, if you look at this impact investing or faith-based investing, so there is a convergence among different faith tradition, and I'm just want to focus on this thing. Intentionality of impact and investment must be made with the explicit intention that the investment have a positive social or environmental impact. There has to be a financial return. The investment has a return on capital and is thus not an act of philanthropy or charity. A range of asset classes investment target a rate of return somewhere between below market to fixed adjustment market rate across all asset classes, and there has to be a way of measuring impact. The investor must be committed to measuring the social or environmental impact on the investment. Now, impact investment is intended to generate positive, measurable social and environmental impacts along with financial returns. Like you have in Malaysia, the education sukuk that is being used to improve education in the primary and secondary. The emergence of impact investment, social and environmental, as a financial market is relatively recent despite a long history of the social economy. Key drivers behind the emergence of impact investment include the changing investor preferences, demographics, and the changing long-term risk models. And however, you have all these beautiful things. Nevertheless, the impact investment market is still under institutionalized, lacks consistent terminology, consolidated data performance, or regulations. Now, if you look at the sustainable impact investment spectrum, the estimated return, the approximate size. So you have the impact only, an example of the grant, and impact first, example of the program related investment, impact investment, impact first, impact in finance first. They have the mission related investment, they have the finance first. So these are the size of the market roughly. It's a rough estimation. 75 million is the grant market, 134 217, 15 724 million development finance. Green social bonds is 1.4 trillion, and ESG is about 53.6 trillion. On the top is roughly the rate of return that is being generated. So ESG can generate return between 12 to 18%. On the other hand, impact only, the rate of return is 0. Now, if we look at the market size and returns, the grants, as I said before, estimated market size of 75 billion, approximated as 5% of total foundational assets globally. And PRI, program-related investment, are also included in the 5% grant allocation. Mission-related investment could potentially equal the assets of all foundation, approximately 1.5 trillion globally. Impact investment, using a survey published in 2020, GIN estimated the core impact investment market size is about 715 billion. And development finance, the 25 HIPSCO signatory development financial institution could be seen as the impact investors with a total asset of 724 billion, and expected risk-adjusted returns are expected to be approximately 10%. So Islamic development is part of this 25 HIPSO financial institutions. And ESG in 2018, more than half of all global assets under management followed some form of ESG with a market size of $54 trillion. The evidence suggests that over 95% of ESG is negative. So, what is the convergence among different faith traditions? Christianity can take its investing principle from both the Old and New Testament, providing guidance of where one should invest or not. Impact investment is supported by Christian stewardship and is consistent with principles laid out in encyclicals such as the common priority to address care for the planet. Judaism has a clear set of specific rules for the conducting of financial and commercial activities, and within the stated values are clear justification for impact investment, the drive to act intentionally to make positive changes to the society. Islam, on the other hand, through the Quran and other religious texts, lays out a set of rules concerning investment more than any other faith and enough for a separate system of finance. And Islamic scriptural support for impact investment comes from the explicit responsibility for Muslims to preserve the earth as it stewards, as stated in the Quran. Now, the dharmic principle like Hindu religion emphasize environmental stewardship, sustainability, and improving the general welfare of the world. Therefore, it may be considered dharmically correct for an investing entity to invest in those opportunities that also provide for the betterment of the environment and society. Buddhism also stated the idea of right livelihood, doing business without causing harm or violence to others. Ideally, decision making would be made using an integrated framework or mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. The two principles that guide Sikh views on finance and wealth creation are dharmasal, the pursuit of social justice and social responsibilities, and Rihad Maryada, Sikh code of discipline. So as such, investing in stocks and shares may not appeal to many Sikhs. However, impact investment aligns with this principle very well. So if you put this in a framework, diagramming a framework, the religion that I talked about, 7 religions here. So Christianity, Islam, and Judaism have specific principles in investment, but the other 4 religions, the principles from which investment principle can be derived. So it is not like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, it is not specifically prescribed or mentioned in the religious text, but you can derive from their teachings. But if you look at the 7 religions, all have convergence point principle that support the impact investment. So there is a difference of different faith tradition. Everybody wants to achieve the same goal. So the fundamental principle under Islamic finance are a great asset to achieve the SDG goals. You have the financial stability, financial inclusion, reducing vulnerability, social and environmental activities, and you have the infrastructure finance. Now, global assets in 2020 were 3.2 trillion. It emphasizes on risk sharing. We call the risk sharing or shared prosperity, linkage to real economic activities, and partnership-based financing is preferred from the Sharia perspective. It has a wide geographic reach, Asia and Middle East, with expected rapid expansion of global assets in Muslim and non-Muslim countries. So Islamic finance will be instrumental in the successful implementation of SDG principle. Now, there was a study done by the Islamic Development Bank, and they have looked at all 17 SDG goals, and they've categorized into different subsector like category, infrastructure development, and capacity building. 8 SDG goals can be achieved, and how that can be achieved? Raising wholesale funding, mainly from Sukuk program, Islamic syndicated financing. You have the social development aspect. 6 SDG goals can be achieved by this, and Islamic social finance and financial inclusion by using this method, Zakat, Waqf, Islam microfinance can achieve this, and promoting innovation to achieve efficiency, industrial revolution 4 or 5, 6 SDGs can be achieved. Equity-based structure is more suitable in promoting innovation, such as Islamic private equity, venture capital, equity funds, and crowdfunding. Now, if you look at Islamic investment tools, if you look at, for example, crowdfunding, the instruments, Islamic crowdfunding instruments, the crowdfunding platform Impact Enterprises, and sample results beneficiaries, the macro enterprises. Then you have the green investment, you have the microfinance, you have the insurance coverage for the poor, you have the social investment, for example, SRI Sukuk, government program, inclusive business, social business, and improved access to health, education, etc. You have the SME finance. SME as overlooked. The banks really do not provide finance to SMEs. You can have Musharaka instrument. SMEs are the impact enterprises, and you have the livelihood improvement. If you look at green investment, for example, Green Sukuk, the renewable energy enterprises, reduction in our carbon emissions. Microfinance is well studied, Islamic microfinance, MFI, and it generates or achieves financial inclusion. Now, finally, I'm coming to the last part of my presentation, Islamic finance as value-based alternative. Now, it is rooted in divine law, prohibition of harmful transactions. It gives economic justice. Economic justice for all humanity is not only for Muslim, for all faith tradition. Circulation of wealth, interest concentrates wealth, commoditization. There has to be a link between finance and real economic activities. Risk sharing, that does not transfer risk to the borrower. Now, if you compare lending is a debt-based economy and investing in an ethical equity-based economy. So lending debt-based economy would be conventional financial system or banking system. Investing in an ethical equity-based economy would be an Islamic finance system or Islamic economic system. So if you look at a lending-based economy, it's a win-lose framework, so it's a zero-sum game. But investing in ethical way is a win-win framework or Islamic way. In a lending, it creates debt, but in an investing, it invests in real assets. Lending, risk is transferred from one party to the other party, but in investing framework, risk is shared. Unfair gains from profit and losses in a lending-based system, and just and fair profits and loss sharing in an investing-based system. In a lending-based system, rich gets richer, poor gets poor, so there is a huge income inequality in a society. But in an investing in ethical equity-based economy, there is justice and equity for everyone. So there was a number, I want to give you this, the financialization of creating debt upon debt. The fictional financial economy is over 26 times larger than everything else produced on earth in 2010. If you look at this number again, somebody redo this figure again, they will see that number is increasing because too much debt is being created in a fractional reserve banking system. In some way, we have to put a lead onto this debt creation, and that is dangerous for us and for our future generation. Now, if you look at Islamic finance, it is a comprehensive system. It combines for those have and those have not. So it mobilizes resources. You have the corporation, you have the high net worth individuals, you have the affluent individuals, you have the upper middle class, you have the middle class, and how they are being served, mobilizing resources, Islamic financial institutions, SMEs, and example, you can have sukuk investment, you could have equity funding. But the have-nots on the bottom side, reducing the gap. How do you reduce in the gap? So you have the lower middle class, you can use microfinance and micro takaful to help them. You have hardcore poor, you can use Islamic social finance, zakat, awqaf, sadaqah, and qardul hasan. Now, core of Islamic economics finance. So we have all this debate which way the Islamic economics finance is going. So there are different framework or different schools of thought, even in Islamic economic system. Some people say that you add Islamic elements with the conventional system and make it Islamic. Some scholars say that work on institutional change because Islamic system calls for different institution. Another type of scholars say that work on social finance instead of commercial finance. So forget about the banking system. Another group of scholars say that work on environmental issues and circular economy because this is closer to Islamic finance. And there is a fifth group of scholars say that work on Islamic moral economy at philosophical level. And there's also another group of economists says, another group of scholars says, you create a new paradigm by rejecting everything conventional and build on different mindset. And number 7, there are some pragmatic scholars say that focus on ways to address social, economic challenges using Islamic principles. So this is group 7, a more pragmatic type of thinkers within the Islamic economics and finance system. Now, an Islamic economic finance solution would be what? We live in a digital war right now. So digital infrastructure powered by artificial intelligence and big data can resolve the information asymmetry, can use unstructured information and provide tracking. Success of financial infrastructure depends on building sustainable and inclusive scheme. And success is in a holistic approach using grants, loans, supplier credit, equity finance, the level of poverty and risk-sharing ability of micro entrepreneurs accounted for through artificial intelligence. Feature engineering is key of balancing the framework with data and technology with more advanced in artificial intelligence. It may change. So what we envision, how you can help the small, micro, small and medium enterprises. You have the Islamic finance framework. You add the digital infrastructure with this thing. Of course, you use of technology in order to empower the small businesses, the entrepreneurs. And this is the 80% of GDP or GNP of any country. 80% of the employment are generated by medium, small, and medium enterprises. So how do you create Islamic economics and finance? You pour identification for targeted assistance. You do credit scoring using alternate data for micro, small business financing. You need to create entrepreneurs in society and entrepreneur capacity identification for PLS financing. So a pragmatic group of scholars would say that you choose a real problem, attempt to solve by creating an Islamic framework and use available techniques. So you look at it in a holistic way, be pragmatic, use Islamic principle, and that's the way economics or Islamic banking and finance, Islamic economics should proceed. So what are the challenges facing Islamic finance right now? We have a developing appropriate legal, regulatory, supervisory, and Sharia framework. Many countries have it. Malaysia is a good example. They have developed all this Sharia framework very well, but many countries do not have it. For example, Bangladesh, Islamic finance industry even bigger than Malaysia, but it does not have this structured legal, regulatory, and supervisory framework. Managing the liquidity in Islamic financial institutions is a big problem because Islamic banks cannot put their money into interest-bearing money market instruments, so they have to come up with an alternative. And work is going on in order to develop this liquidity, Sharia-based liquidity instruments. You continue development of financial products that have positive impact on the economy. So we have, like anywhere, 60% of the younger generation are looking for jobs. So the government cannot provide them jobs. So we really have to come up with financial product to make them more entrepreneurs so that they can stand on their own foot doing business and so on. And Islamic banking and finance has to be supported for this one. Development of Islamic microfinance, poverty alleviation. Different countries have the experiment of this thing. Bangladesh has made a very good case. Islamic Bank Bangladesh Limited has this RDS project, and through these things, it has reached nook and corner of Bangladeshi villages. Then you have the encouragement of financing income generation outcome projects and the capacity building of Waqf institution. Some countries is developed. Malaysia and Indonesia comes to a good example. They have a good law and so on, whereas Bangladesh is still trying to develop it. Commitment to apply Sharia accounting and supervisory standard issued by specialized institutions. I'm coming to its end. So there are challenges facing Islamic financial institutions still. We have a communication gap, misconception, misunderstanding, and misplaced notions about Islamic finance must be removed through awareness and advocacy program. There is trust gap. Social business and impact investing should be emphasized to remove tension among the stakeholders of the Islamic finance industry. There is innovation gap. Balance between macro and micro makashi should be maintained. the so-called form versus substance or financial engineering. And there is a talent gap. A new brand of scholars who are well versed in Islamic jurisprudence and secular financing techniques and mechanism must be nurtured. So these are the four things we really need to put emphasis on. And my very first opening slide, then if we do this, we'll be able to answer or remove all the doubts that I've raised at the beginning of my presentation. And the last slide, Islamic finance is a value-based finance, and it is a paradigm shift. We want to go from instability to stability, from deception to transparency, deregulation to regulation, value neutral, and timeless values. And in order to achieve this, our academic institutions have to develop the new generation of Islamic finance scholars. I thank you, everyone. I acknowledge the writings of various authors over the years from which I have benefited immensely and whose ideas have mingled with mine in this presentation. And there are some few of my own work. You can go over this in order to get a better understanding of my presentation today. And thank you very much for listening to me. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Hassan, for the very insightful presentation on the convergence of Islamic finance or ethical finance and Islamic finance. Okay, inshallah, Prof, we have some questions here. Right, the first question comes from Dr. Amirul Afif Muhammad. Okay, let me read the question for you. Okay, inshallah. Okay, Prof, from your observation, how does the Islamic financial institutions react to COVID-19 in terms of extending the assistance to the bank's customers and the general public?
You know, it's a very good question, but in different countries have experimented in different ways. Like in Bangladesh, for example, in the country I know, they have given sort of postponement of their payment for 6 months, 3 months, certain things like this. But let me tell you, I mean, don't expect the Islamic financial institution to do everything for you. I mean, these are money-making institutions, right? And nowhere in the Quran and Sunnah Allah says that you cannot make money, profit.
Yeah.
The profit motive incentive works, okay? But if you want them, of course, in a basic principle of lending, I mean, that if the borrower is incapable or certain things happen, you have to give them time. And that Islamic finance or financial institutions following everywhere, I believe. But what they are doing, they are doing some creative accounting so that instead of showing loss, they want to, back it up. So there has been a lot of confusion whether you can use this, forgiven, can capitalize and bring it back to your income framework. So this part, in a short answer, I cannot explain very well. So there has been some Sharia issues because different countries, in Bangladesh, for example, the Islamic banks, they said that, okay, if we do not, if we give them respite for 6 months, and if you do not really get this, profit loss sharing the amount, then we are going to take a loss, and how we are going to pay the depositors. So there are, from the financial perspective, but there are also the Sharia part of it, this thing. And we are finishing a research project where we've shown that what the Islamic banks are in practice doing in Bangladesh or many other countries is not really Sharia compliant, is violating the Sharia.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. It seems like these are the only questions that we have for you this morning, Prof. Okay, on behalf of the committee members, I would like to thank you very much for your time, for your insightful comments, sharings today. Inshallah, hopefully we'll be able to have the opportunity, right, to have you again, right, as our distinguished speaker, right, for our future conferences, inshallah. Okay, I hand this session over to our moderator, inshallah.
Special thanks to the distinguished panel and moderator for insightful sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, kindly be informed that we shall have the second keynote speech session by Professor Dr. Ferdinand Akhtar Gul at 11:45 a.m. today. Please stay tuned and thank you very much. Halo, Assalamualaikum. our second keynote speech session, please allow me to invite Professor Dr. Ferdinand Akhtargul from Australia to deliver his sharing. The moderator for this session is Dr. Sharifah Nurhafizah binti Said Ibrahim from UiTM Cawangan Melaka, Malaysia. Tafadhal ma'jura.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to our Malaysian audience and good morning to our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Ferdinand Akhtargul. Welcome to the Virtual Asian Conference on Business, Economic and Social Science 2021, Prof. I'm Sharifah Nurhafizah.
Thank you. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Ya, sama-sama. I'm Sharifah Nurhafizah Said Ibrahim from Faculty of Accountancy, UiTM Melaka, and I'll be the moderator for our second keynote speaker session. Before we get started, I wanted to take a few minutes of your time to introduce our renowned speaker. Professor Ferdinand Akhtargul is currently serving as Alfred Deakin Professor of Accounting and Finance at Faculty of Business and Law, Deakin University, Burwood, Melbourne, Australia. Professor Gul subscribes to a interdisciplinary research philosophy, emphasizing the idea that theories and forces in economics, politics, and law take place in the practice of accounting, auditing, and corporate finance. He is a recognized authority in the field of empirical accounting finance based on his publications in leading high impact factor journals such as Journal of Accounting and Economics, the Accounting Review, Auditing, a Journal of Practice and Theory, Contemporary Accounting Research, Accounting, Organizations and Society, Journal of Banking and Finance, Journal of Corporate Finance, and many other high impact factor journals. Other than that, he has published books on China's socio-economic reforms, auditing and corporate governance of East Asian corporations. In 2019, the Brigham Young University Worldwide Rankings for publications under the category of archival auditing for the last 16 years has placed him number 6 worldwide with Google citation 17,501, H index 54. Professor Gul obtained his first degree from University of Malaya. So that's a Prof. Gul can speak Malay. He's also multilingual, Chinese, Mandarin and other language. Master degree in Accounting and Finance from University of Liverpool, UK. PhD in Accounting from University of New England, UK. And Doctor of Economics Research degree by Monash University, Australia in 2012. Not only with such excellent academic tracks, Professor Gul is also a fellow member of several professional bodies such as Institute of Chartered Accountants in Australia, Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountant, and Academy of the Social Sciences in Australia. Professor Gul has won several accolades in terms of teaching and research and has substantial experience in providing consultancy services in corporate governance. We are very lucky indeed today for having such an outstanding academic. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Ferdinand Akhtargul to enlighten us with his topic, Sustainability, Integrated Reporting and Firm Values.
Okay, first of all, terima kasih for those very kind words. And I would like to also thank you all for thinking of me and inviting me. I'm always happy, seronok, to speak to Malaysians because I was born and raised in Malaysia. Every time when I'm lonely or sad, I think of the days when I grew up in the kampung and when I grew up by the beach in Kuala Muda, fishing and boating. And so it has very lovely memories. I hope later in life I can go back to those places by the beach and live there and enjoy the beautiful scenery, the food, and the environment in Malaysia. Terima kasih again. So today I'm going to be talking about sustainability and make some comments, general comments, okay? So I see that my screen is already up, and terima kasih Zunaida, Dr. Zunaida. So let's go to the first screen. Okay. Now, sustainability is a major problem. And we cannot we cannot continue pretending that it's not a problem. It is a major problem because it will destroy us. Now, we cannot destroy the environments in a big way because planet Earth will replenish itself in the long run. It has, according to science, the planet has been around for billions of years. But if we continue to disregard issues of pollution, issues that increase carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we are going to destroy ourselves. And the issue of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is driven by so many factors: cars, factories, rivers being polluted, and so on. But today I just want to highlight one graph here. I hope you can see it. This is the issue of deforestation. And deforestation is a major issue in Malaysia. And if you look at the world number 1 in indiscriminate logging and palm oil production, it is Malaysia. And there are many other countries there. Of course, there is Indonesia, there is Nicaragua, Finland, so on and so forth. But this is an eye-opener, and I raised this about 6 months ago in another talk. Deforestation takes a long time to replenish the forest. And this is mainly in Sarawak, Sabah, and also mainland Malaysia. Now, this is an example of what I call pollution. In a sense, this is pollution. And this is very serious because short-term profits, I am not sure how these profits are being distributed, who is getting rich, but there have been some allegations, and it is not my place here to make any accusations. But members of the public in Malaysia, you should start thinking about these issues seriously, because if you don't, you will have problems later on for your children and their children. So for the future, these issues must be looked at. So I've just only focused on deforestation. I can also tell you that the rivers, many of the rivers in Malaysia and many other countries are very highly polluted. They have done samples of rivers, the sample of water taken from the river, and it shows very high levels of pollution. So this is pretty serious. 100 years ago, our ancestors lived and drank the waters from the river. There were beautiful streams all over Malaysia, clean streams. They have disappeared because of industrialization, and the rivers have got polluted. Okay, so I leave that aside. Today, what I'm going to talk about is the issue of integrated reporting. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Now this idea of integrated reporting is a small contribution because it deals with the private sector. Remember that the private sector, in terms of small businesses and the publicly listed company, is not very big. It ranges from about 20 to 40 to 50% of the whole economy. The economy, of course, is sustained by so many small businesses. The person who is selling nasi lemak, the contractor, the car repairer, the bicycle shop, many of these contribute. Now, the big business are the ones that have the resources to exploit the environment. And therefore, there is a call that big businesses, should start reporting their sustainable activities so that investors can decide whether to support a firm or not. Now, there are some studies that suggest that if the investors take the trouble to discipline firms, it is possible that the big corporations can be more responsible. And with this in mind, the International Integrated Reporting Council has come up with the idea that corporations around the world, including Malaysia, should have a section called integrated reporting. And integrated reporting is designed to ensure that the firm reports how its sustainability or sustainability impact activities affect the firm and how the firm activities affect these sustainable impact factors. So this is to try and inculcate some level of discipline amongst the corporation. So this integrated reporting is related to financial reporting, and it's a small segment of sustainability activities which some regulators and some voluntary organizations are trying to encourage. So the integrated report is providing a forum for a firm to report on its organization strategy, its governance, its performance, its prospects in the context of external environment. 20 years ago, nobody talked about the external environment. You look at our Sime Darby, you drive around Malaysia and you see Sime Darby has, acres and acres of palm oil. The question is, yes, in the short run, it's a lot of profits. But in the long run, with the clearing of the forest for rubber at first and now palm oil, the question is, does it affect the environment? And how and what is the cost to the community? Remember, these firms don't pay anything for destroying the community and for destroying this environment. They don't pay anything. And yet they are making huge profits. So there are now calls from an ethical perspective that firms, because they have used the environment, what they call in economics externalities, they need to be responsible and give back to the community, either by way of good pollution control, and in some other countries they are talking about carbon tax. Okay, the interest is the creation of value over the short, medium, and long term. So get familiar with the International Integrated Reporting Council. You're going to hear more of it. It is a global coalition of regulators, investors, companies, standard setters, the accounting profession, NGOs, and the coalition promotes communication about value creation as the next step in the evolution of corporate reporting. So you report your profits, but what have you done for the environment? What have you done for the man on the street? Now, these are ethical issues, actually. And the IIRC have announced their intention to merge in 2021 into the Value Reporting Foundation, which is a unified organization intended to provide investors and corporations with comprehensive corporate reporting framework. Now you will find many companies in Malaysia or anywhere in the world, they do report as an appendix their activities, or they say we look after our employees, we look after the pollution, we look after the environment, but this needs to be integrated into the financial reporting framework. It is still very early. There's only, as far as I know, only South Africa has mandated. The rest, Malaysia, Singapore, and Australia, and many countries, it's voluntary. Okay, so there is a Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and that I hope will develop. So in the integrated reports now, which is voluntary so far in Australia and in Malaysia, some do it, and today I will discuss with you some incentives, how companies might include their integrated reports for perhaps opportunistic reason. I'm going to suggest that, and let's see whether we have some evidence. So integrated reports can be very little, just a few here and there matters, or can be long. There's one integrated report we looked at was 180 pages long in Australia. I haven't had the chance to have a look at the Malaysian reports because I haven't been able to go back because of the COVID, hoping that this will soon be lifted so that I can go back and visit family. Okay, so we go on to the next slide now. And so we are looking at the reporting norm. So what is the reporting norm of the Integrated Reporting Council? First, there must be quality of information. The information must be cohesive and efficient. They must integrate with the report. And remember, this is something those of you who work in this area will probably be aware of. There are 6 capitals. You've got financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social, relationship, natural. F is natural. And they must support integrated thinking. The decision-making, actions, so on must be integrated. So the emphasis again is you want to go into manufacturing, you want to go into some activity, integrate your activities with the ethical dimensions of looking after your environment, and then and make sure that you report on these issues. Okay, so the issue here that today I'm interested in and want to just share with you is whatever mandatory integrated reporting that's available, that's currently being practiced in countries around the world, except South Africa, which is mandatory. Australia is voluntary. So the question is whatever that is being reported is achieving its objectives? Does it make a difference? Okay, we go to the next slide now. So, so large corporations worldwide, General Electric, Mitsubishi, Tata Steel, Australia Post, and so on, they have been reporting voluntarily integrated reporting for some time now. I give you some examples in Australia where there is a high, we're going to score integrated reporting. There's a way of doing it, a measurement that we use where we can say there's much information or low information. Now, 45 is a very high group, high score. This is Lend-Lease Group 2017. Now, the number of pages is 199. It has got diagrams, charts, tables. Yes, it has description of business. It has description of value. And it talks about core value, respect, integrity, innovation, collaboration, excellence, trust, pillars of value, health and safety, customers, people, and sustainability. There's a description of strategy. There's a description of risk, description of performance, description of governments, board of directors, and financial statements and other information. Okay, next slide, please. Now, you get another company with a score of 16, a bit low. It has 136 pages, but mainly maybe charts, tables. It just has a description of business, description of corporate responsibility, board of directors, and financial reports. So not very many, not much. The low score is about 6. This is Ardent Leisure. It has 132 pages, which is less. Diagrams, charts, minimal discussion of business and information about stakeholders. And then the director's report are just stapled, and then financial statements. So this is just an illustration of 3 reports, why some companies will get high scores and some companies will get low scores based on their integrated reporting. Next slide, please. So the question is, the idea is that there are benefits and there are challenges. So benefits are obvious, holistic picture of activities, capital market channel, better communication with stakeholders, better able to manage risk. There are costs and benefits, of course. And then you can measure this by the capital market channel, which we will look at today. The real effects channel. The real effects, don't get confused. It simply means whether managers in making managerial decisions, we're not talking about investors, managerial, their real effects. Does integrated reporting information help? Some suggest it does. In our study, we're not going to look at that. We're just going to look at the capital market. We're going to look at how investors behave. So the challenges are there is no lack of guidance. It's all voluntary. There's lack of clarity, and it requires professional judgment. How do you assure? How do you audit it? There's no auditing for this type of reports. There's no standards yet. It's only some guidance. This is forward-looking information. And the most serious that I have discovered recently is integrated reporting can be opportunistically used as a smoke screen. And so this is a bit of a concern, okay? So we have the amount and type of information that's included in the report, and we also need to worry about the reliability and relevance of information chosen by managers. So managers choose this information to report. Does it make a difference to investors? We want to find out. Okay, next slide, please. Now, there are so many studies that have tried to answer this question. Look at it carefully. Lee and Yo, they show that this is all voluntary, okay, except the last one. They show that if you have more integrated reporting, the firm valuation goes up. Then you have Babu Cardos and Rimal. They also show that the value relevance of earnings improves after mandatory adoption of integrated reporting. And I think you know what value relevance is of earnings. You could use the earnings response coefficient, but I don't have time to look at that. The third one is Zhao, Simnet, and Green. And they investigate analyst forecast errors in South Africa. Oh, sorry, this is mandatory and find a negative association. In other words, integrated reporting reduces analyst forecasts. And so this is good. It means that analysts are more confident of firms with integrated reporting. Now, the paper that we are very interested in is Barth, Kehan, Chen, and Venter. They find a positive association between integrated disclosures and firm valuation in South Africa. And they find that this relationship is strong through the capital market channel and through the real effects channel. So let me just quickly explain this a bit. So they show integrated reporting is positively associated with Tobin's Q, which is firm valuation. Okay, good. Integrated reporting is positively related with firm valuation. But what is the channel? How does integrated reporting affect firm valuation? How? The channel. And the channel they use is the capital market channel. So you will see in the next slide that the capital market channel they use is bid-ask spread. So if you have higher integrated reporting and that leads to higher bid-ask spread, and if there's a higher or lower bid-ask spread, that will affect firm valuation. So the smaller the bid-ask spread, the better it is. So that leads to higher firm valuation. Now, the real effects channel, they say that the investment efficiency, they look at the relationship between investment, which is capital expenditure, and they look at some measures of efficiency. And they say that if you have integrated reporting, the investment efficiency will be important, will be better. So have a look at that. We're not going to look at real effects channel because of the idea of the opportunistic use of information. So we are going, because managers will use this information opportunistically for the investors, but not for the internal management. So we exclude that. So next slide, please. So in summary, prior studies show that no, can we go back, please? I'm sorry. Prior study shows that IR is related to positive effects on investors and managers. So are there any possible shortcomings? And this is discussed in the next slide. This paper, next slide, please. This paper is by some people, some writers, who argue that higher integrated principles may not lead to higher firm values. Why? Well, they say that managers may be motivated by legitimizing aspects of advancing corporate reputation and stakeholder needs than satisfying investor needs. This is by Stein. So advancing corporate reputation. So they use the term investor impression management. This is an interesting area of research. Managers try to impress investors. And so they only do, according to this idea, they only do this because they want to invest, they want to impress investors. And this paper by Melanie Caglio and Perego, they examine the impact of integrated reporting on the behavior of management and find that integrated reporting adopters could be using it to manage investors' impressions of the company. In other words, a smoke screen. So on the one hand, you have all these papers that show that integrated reporting improves firm value. On the other hand, there is this study that says that high levels of integrated reporting could be used as a smoke screen or as a tool to obfuscate bad information, poor information. So the activities, the business is not very good. So they say, hey, we are doing a lot of work on integrated reporting. So this paper raises a serious problem that high integrated reporting may not be good. There is, in other words, an implication here that integrated reporting has an optimal level. Up to a certain point, good. But beyond that, there are also other reasons why too much information is bad. Imagine if you have, like the first case, 180 pages of so much of information. Do you really think the investors will be looking at it carefully? I doubt it. First of all, there is the problem of information overload. If you give people too much of information, just like you teach your students too much in one lecture, the poor students get confused. The same way with investors. It is called information overload theory, and that is in human information processing. The second problem is also the cost. Investors have to be careful about their cost. The cost of identifying, the cost of assessing, the cost of evaluating. It must not, the benefits must exceed the cost. So too much of information would be too costly for the investors to spend too much of time in trying to analyze the data. Okay, so with this in mind, can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So what Melanie et al. Do is they use textual analysis. They find that integrated reports for companies with poor financial performance tend to be longer, less readable, and more optimistic. In other words, some companies are more likely to include IR and include particularly high levels of diverse information in their reports to camouflage their poor performance. In other words, smokescreen. Okay. Okay, there's a question here. May I know what is a smokescreen? Smokescreen is just an English word where you try to window dress. You know, for example, if you're very sick, you know, you wear some nice clothes and you window dress that to show that you are not sick. So this is what's happening, window dressing, smoke screen. So the word is obfuscation, and that is to hide the reality. I hope that explains the question. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So based on this discussion, the question is, does IR affect how capital market work in Australia? So we use Australian data. The question again, how does different degrees of complying with IR principles affect firm values? So that IR principle, just now you saw the 6 capitals. So if you comply with that, you put in more information. But beyond that, you can also add a lot of different information like photographs and your opinion and so on. So what do we find? Since I may not have time to finish, let me tell you what we find. We find a non-linear and concave relationship between IR and firm value, which is Tobin skew. We use Tobin skew because that paper, BCCV, uses Tobin skew. So at low to moderate levels of IR, there is a significant positive association between the levels of integrated reporting. But as you get more, there is then becomes a significant negative association between IR and firm value, which is consistent with obfuscation or smokescreen hypothesis. And the channel is through market participants. We find that the results also hold when we use the channels. Next slide, please. And we also have two additional tests. We look at the value relevance of earnings ERC to link the idea of integrated reporting and obfuscation. And we find that there is also a non-linear relationship. At first, the earnings response coefficient improves, and because there is an attempt at obfuscation, the earnings returns coefficient becomes negative. There is less information. Additionally, if there is obfuscation, it is possible that managers may use rules which are So now we have all right, no worries. We believe that managers are
We have some technical problem, I think, with our internet access. We are going to get Prof. Go back to the session. Yeah, I think because we have this troubling.
Investors are very happy.
We lost
But
you,
yes,
Prof.
I'm fine,
We
thank
lost
you. No problem. I'll just continue speaking. Ini tak apa ni.
Okay.
The next
All
page,
right.
please. Yeah. And then, so we come to the first hypothesis, which is the association between levels of integrated reporting and firm value is likely to be non-linear and concave. So that is the first hypothesis that looks at the IR and firm value. And concave because high levels, we expect the relationship to become negative because of smokescreen obfuscation of earnings management. Okay, the next slide. Then we look at the capital market channel. So yes, how does IR affect firm value? And it is through the bid-ask spread as a proxy. So we say that the association between integrated reporting and bid-ask spread is likely to also be non-linear and convex. Thank you. The next slide, please. So how do we measure quality of integrated report? I ask you to read the paper by Barth et al., which is published in AOS. They have a methodology, and we use a similar methodology. And our paper should be ready in the next few weeks, I think. And I hope we can publish it. If you write to us or you write to your coordinator, I'll try to get the paper to you. So we got expert advice from KPMG Australia, where they help us to code the data so that we can provide scores for each firm. So high IR means that the firm follows IRC principles, and we measure 14 different characteristics of the report. For each item, we use a 5-point scale: 0 not compliant and 5 complete compliance. And then we get the score, and then we log the score, and we get a maximum score of 70. Just now I showed you on your slides, there was a score of 60, 15, and 8 or 4. So different levels of score, there was good variation. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this I'll go through very quickly. These are the quality attributes. You can see the items there. Capital, strategic focus, governance, risk, performance. These are the various categories. And, excuse me. So these were measures that were also based in BART. Some we added, the question mark were those that we added. Next slide, please. Okay, firm value is Tobin skew. Capital market, I already mentioned. We used the bid-ask spread. We used the mean spread and the median spread. There's the real effects channel. We didn't test it, but I put it here, where we look at the investment efficiency. I put it there because some of you might be interested to study investment efficiency, maybe in Malaysian companies. The paper is by Biddle, and there's the formula: investment and sales growth. So investment inefficiency equals to the decile rank of the absolute value of the residual. So you can use this formula. Okay, next slide, please. This is we of course also tried principal component analysis of the various components of the 14 items, and we arrived at 4 principal components: strategy, environment, details, and risk. We found they loaded on these 4. There's a correlation matrix there, which you can look at, and it's pretty straightforward, and the standard relationships as we expect. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the control variables: asset growth, accounting quality measured as the percentage of prior 4 years of small earning surprise. We look at earning surprise. We look at market beta. We look at cash flow. We look at current ratio, loss dummy, idiosyncratic volatility, total assets, natural logarithm of market value, natural lag of total assets, ratio of market value to book value, number of pages in the annual report. So these are the controls. The number of pages is important as a control in the regression. Okay, next one, please. Then we have the descriptive statistics. You can see the IR ranges from, we only have up to 3.8 is the median, Q3, and same with the PG and the R. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? Descriptives are pretty straightforward. Okay, here we just graph the relationship into 4 quartiles so that you have a visual impact. What we show here is that IR goes up and comes down quite drastically when it's very high. So this is already a box diagram, simple diagram, that shows that there is a relationship between integrated reporting and Tobin skew. Okay, next slide, please. This is the lowest plot of Tobin skew versus IR. Actually, we don't really need this, but I just put it up, and this is available on one of your programs. Okay, next plot, please. Next graph. Okay, this is the formula, the regression we use. Now, to capture the concave relationship, we had to put a squared term. So you can see that B1 is IR, B2 is IR squared. And with all the control variables, these are similar. These are actually identical with Bart's paper so that we can compare with their results. Okay, and integrated reporting is the value that we use, natural logarithm of the sum of all those items. And I mentioned to you that we used Pete Marwick and KPMG to help us develop this. We needed some independent assistance. They also also gave us some good critical advice. All right, next slide, please. Okay, here's the regression, the first one. Now, what is interesting is you can see that when we only use IR, this is the first column is Mary Barth, same regression. And they showed a significant positive, but they were much stronger than us. We are 1.30, which is a one-tail test. Two-tail test, it fails. It's not significant, but one tail, it is significant. And they use a one-tail test, significant at 10%. Okay, but when you look at when we put both IR and IR squared, the results become very good. You can see that it's positive, has low levels. As you get above a certain point, which you can calculate, it becomes negative. The R squared is also quite interesting. It goes from 0.57, 57 to 59%. So it's not bad. It adds about 2% to the model. So we show here that it is a concave relationship. Now, unfortunately, the Barth et al. Paper did not test for this. We did write to South Africa and we asked the authors whether we can have the data so that we can do this test, but they didn't even reply. And so what do? People don't want to give you the data. Well, there's nothing you can do. Okay, next slide, please. This is a capital markets effect. So this is the channel. So if we are saying that integrated reporting increases firm value, the question is how? How does it increase firm value? How? It increases firm value through the bid-R spread. It's a proxy. It's one proxy, okay? And this is the model we use. We use mean spread and median spread. And median spread and mean spread of daily closing bid-R spread during the fiscal year respectively, okay? And then the rest are all control variables which are in the standard spread model. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, here's the results. You look at it, mean spread. You can see that as you increase your IR, it's negative. It means that the bid-R spread gets smaller. It reduces the information asymmetry, if you like. But after a certain point, it becomes positive. Both mean spread and median spread. So these results are consistent. So the channel through the reason why firm value goes down with the high levels of IR is because the information is reduced and we measure it through the bid-R spread. Okay, so this is consistent with the concave relationship. All right, next slide, please. Okay, we need to do endogeneity tests. 20 years ago, there was no questions about endogeneity tests. Today in finance, accounting, management, this keeps cropping up all the time. So we need to do some endogeneity tests, and we chose the two-stage regression model. We used the pages as an instrument variable to address the problem. There could be some disagreement about the choice of the instrument variable, but this is the best that we can get. So there is the first stage and second stage. You can see that IR and firm value in the first stage. And for the first stage, we are testing for firm value. And the second stage, firm, you can see the Q. The second regression leads to the IR, and here we are looking for IR to enter in the second stage for the spread model. So those are the first stage and second stage, and we address it through what we call instrument variable. And the instrument variable is the page. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is the results of endogeneity. We did it and we got the same results. Next slide, please. And same with the same, we got the same results, consistent, right? Next slide, please. Okay, we also did a test of the subcomponents, and we also got similar results, but the most important component was risk. Can we skip this slide, please? Okay, same thing, we're testing the different components. Next slide, please. Okay, we've settled that. Now we go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, here we introduce the role of earnings. So this is the third test. We want to see whether it's consistent with the idea of obfuscation. And we find, we use the earnings response coefficient, which is the B2 and B3. So B4 and B5 is the focus here, the times IR and the NC times IR squared. Now, can INC or INC is the income scaled by average asset. Okay, next slide, please. So here we got the results. We find that at medium to high levels, it's very good. Earnings is positively related to stock prices, stock returns. And at very high, it becomes negative. Again, suggesting that even the investors are discounting your earnings. Now we want to go into the firm and see whether there's earnings management. Can we go to the next slide, please? Here we do look at absolute accruals, okay? And here we are now saying if it's a smoke screen, then high levels of integrated reporting must be related to high earnings management. And we use absolute value of accruals. Now, in other tests, we will be doing positive, negative accruals and different measures maybe. In Australia, it's very difficult to get information on restatements and so on. So we are sticking to accruals, absolute accruals. Can we have the results? Next page. Here you can see the results now. Here in the first two columns, you can see that it's negative. So as firms increase their IR, there's lower accruals. But as they increase it further, there is high accruals consistent with obfuscation. So high R squared, or high IR, higher earnings management. Then we see whether strong governance and weak governance can mitigate the problem. We find that actually when there's weak governance, there is this non-linear relationship. But if there's strong governance, this disappears. So it suggests support for because if you have strong governance, there's less agency cost and therefore less chance for managers to manage earnings. So the conclusion is that integrated reporting, high levels are used as smokescreen for earnings management, and only more likely to be when the corporate governance is weak. It will not be they will not be able to use it for obfuscation when corporate governance is strong. So that is our conclusion. And we use the percentage of independent non-directors on the board. And next page, please. So the question is, there are weaknesses in the paper. We have very few variables, but the idea, we are providing preliminary support that high levels of integration seem to be used by managers, not all, you only need a few of them to get the results, are being used by managers with weak corporate governance to obfuscate their poor information. And we show in this exploratory study, because they have high earnings management. So by using high earnings management, they use integrated reporting and they hope to use it as a smokescreen. So BCCV find a positive association. We use data from Australia and we add to the growing body of international evidence. Australia is voluntary and we hope it will become mandatory, but it might not be a good idea. It's great to see what happens. And all this implies that there is an optimum level of IR disclosures. So I would encourage you, if you are interested, to look at the data in Malaysia, Indonesia. Many of you are from different countries. I don't know how many participants we have from which other countries, but I suspect you do have from different countries. But it is an interesting area. And so finally, I'd just like to say that there are limitations in this paper. It's a small sample. It is the measures we use for earnings management is limited. The measure we use for corporate governance is also limited. And above all, the biggest caveat is we are not able to completely rule out endogeneity because from the perspective of science, it is impossible to rule out endogeneity. And we are not establishing causality here. We're just talking about some association. So that is the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, for a very valuable talks on integrated reporting. I guess every accounting professional, accounting educators, researchers in accounting area, we really need to know about integrated reporting, and this is a very good opportunity for us. Thank you so much, because now we can see the different angle of looking at possible research on corporate reporting, and thank you for sharing with us also your recent research, not yet published, but you're willing to share it with us on the value of integrated reporting. Now we have a question here, Prof.
Boleh?
From Muhammad Yasir Jaafar. Even it is a voluntary disclosure, firms need to be transparent on disclosing its post effect on environment, community, etc. So probably he would like to hear your comment, your thoughts on this about disclosure.
Yeah, I agree. You know, in Australia, the ethics is very strong, and there are strong laws. But still, we are seeing this evidence is suggesting why is it integrated reporting firm value becomes negative at high levels. This is not an opinion. This is the base on the sample size, which is not bad, 300 over observations. So the science is telling us that there is a problem, and we are trying to give an explanation, which is that there is earnings management. But this is the problem with the business environment, the firms. The business environment, the firms in the business environment are being driven today entirely by profits. We shouldn't have that. We have to change that mentality. You make money, yes, but you have to return it to society, because you are using society's resources. Like, for example, the company that mines quarry. If you drive from Kuala Lumpur to Ipoh, you will see a huge mountain. When I was a young man, that hill was very big, but nowadays when I go back, I find the hill is becoming half. So yes, you get the land, you take the rocks away, but these rocks are taken away forever. Is that worth the money, taking these rocks away forever? Can't you find some more friendly environment, or wood, for example, for building? There has to be some control. You have to find some alternative. And just building and building and building without proper planning can be environmentally disastrous. And you will start some of the result of this kind of environmental adverse effects is like, you find that suddenly get water shortage. Suddenly you get floods. Suddenly you get some buildings collapsing. So anyway, to answer your question, yes, voluntary, important. And I believe that even if the regulators come up with some rules, the best people to teach the company are the investors. If you investors believe very strongly in integrated reporting, you should penalize the companies that are polluting the environment. Those companies that are involved in deforestation, for example, the companies, you should penalize them. Don't buy their shares. But they seem to be, and not only just companies, but they are also individuals who seem to be making a lot of money. And that's for you as responsible citizens to find out and stop. Sorry, I went a little bit off there.
I share your feelings, Prof, because I also care about the environment. It's so sad to see all this damage to the environment. And here, Muhammad Yasir would like to ask you about in terms of voluntary disclosure just now. What is your opinion about how much information need to be disclosed by a company so that it is considered as sufficient? This is very subjective, but we would like
Yes,
to hear
it
your
is.
thoughts.
It is very subjective. And I think that the main thing is you got to be concise. You got to be concise and make it clear. I think one way of moving forward is probably to bring in assurance. You need third parties, maybe an audit firm, to come and tell you and look at your report and challenge some of your disclosures. We already know in anything, too much of information is useless. You know how many pictures they have there, and you know how much it costs to have each of those pictures, 180 pages, a lot of diagrams, pictures, a lot of consultants make out of money at the expense of the company. But the important thing is you have to communicate. So I think that assurance, audit assurance, they should be involved. I think the auditors in Malaysia are pretty good, like in Australia. They belong to the big firms. And I'm sure that they will be able to work out some kind of auditing which says, this is too much already, or this is confusing. You need a balance. So you need a third party like auditors to come in and tell the firms that they should limit it to amounts that can be understood and can be used by investors. Don't put too much of information like what we are showing, 185 pages. Come on. Yeah, who has got time to read 185 pages? It's impossible.
Okay, we come to the next question from Salina Abdullah. What's your opinion about this integrated reporting journey in Australia and Malaysia in the future?
Yes, I would like to see integrated reporting. It doesn't matter actually, either mandatory or voluntary, it doesn't matter. Because if it's voluntary and you don't report it, then the market will penalize you. Your shares won't go up in price. If it's mandatory and you don't report properly, you also penalize. But on balance, I like the idea of voluntary. But the point is that the trouble is if you don't make it mandatory, I don't know how long it will take for integrated reporting to be introduced. But it's fine. Firms should be encouraged. And the trouble is this, the investors themselves don't seem to be concerned. In other countries like the US, you have institutional investors. You have what is called dedicated versus transient institutional investors. So dedicated institutional investors are the long-term investors. They come into the firm, they stay there. They get onto the board, and then they force the companies to report truthfully a certain amount of integrated reporting information. So my answer to you is, I'm open. It can be mandatory, it can be voluntary. Whether it's mandatory or voluntary, when the market decides that you don't put in enough information, it can still penalize you.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. Probably because most of the investors in Malaysia, I think most of the companies in Malaysia are family-owned businesses. So, we don't see that. Yeah.
Family-owned, habis.
But we don't have much time, Prof.
Terima kasih.
Thank you. Sama-sama. So thank you very much again for such a stimulating and valuable sharing, and also about the recent research on integrated reporting just now. We hope to have another opportunity to have a similar sort of session with you in the future. Probably after the COVID-19, you can come back to Malaysia. We can invite you for the face-to-face talk. All right. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I guess that's all for our second keynote speaker session. I hand over the session back to our MC, Mr. Muhammad Malik. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. and Dr. Sharifah, for the first session and also wonderful experiences shared. Terima kasih dan tadi, Prof. Terima kasih sekali budi sekali lagi. Terima kasih. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall have a break for a while and meet again at 2:30 p.m. for the third keynote speech session by Professor Dr. Atiur Rahman. So please stay tuned and thank you so much. See you then, inshallah. See you at